The previous picture, included again in a different format on the left side of this slide, is with Gert Hofstede and me at an event I organized and invited him to speak at in Nagoya, Japan. It was one of the last speaking engagements we took on before passing at the age of 91 in the year 2020. This is outside the Hilton Hotel in Nagoya, waiting for a ride to the dinner for the fellows of the Academy of International Business, which for me was a fantastic opportunity to talk about everything culture with Gert Hofstede. As most, I think you know, Gert Hofstede was a Dutch social psychologist, IBM employee, and professor who is incredibly well known for his pioneering research on culture, of course, as we saw briefly in earlier sessions. So it seemed like a nice fit to have him as the opening background to this session, which is completely dedicated to cultural considerations in international marketing research. There are a variety of cultural frameworks in the literature, but Hofstede's framework remains the most widely adopted by academics and companies. We discussed this framework briefly in session 1 and then a few other times as a foundation for international marketing research more generally. But let's take a look at the details of the framework as well as some specifics on how culture can affect data collection using this well-established framework. First, power distance measures the extent to which less powerful members of a society accept and expect power distribution to be unequal. In high power distance countries like Malaysia, respondents might hesitate to openly criticize or disagree with authority figures, necessitating anonymous surveys or third-party data collection to ensure honest feedback. Collectivism versus individualism assesses the degree to which individuals are integrated into groups. In collectivistic cultures like China, data collection methods that emphasize group consensus, such as focus groups, might yield more reliable data compared to individual interviews, as people are more comfortable expressing opinions in a group setting. Uncertainty avoidance indicates the extent to which members of a culture feel threatened by uncertain or unknown situations. In high uncertainty avoidance countries like Greece, for example, respondents might prefer structured and detailed questionnaires with clear instructions and definitions, as ambiguity can lead to discomfort and unreliable data. Masculinity refers to a preference for achievement, assertiveness, material rewards, whereas femininity stands for cooperation, modesty, care for the weak, and quality of life. In masculine cultures like Japan, competitive elements in surveys, for example, ranking preferences, might engage respondents more effectively, whereas in feminine cultures like my home country of Sweden, emphasizing communal values and consensus might be more appropriate. Long-term orientation emphasizes future rewards, perseverance, and thrift, while short-term orientation focuses on the present or past and respects tradition. In long-term oriented societies like South Korea, longitudinal studies and questions about the future aspirations and savings behavior might be more relevant, whereas in short-term oriented cultures like the United States, immediate outcomes and current behaviors might be prioritized. Indulgence, the last one, refers to a society that allows relatively free gratification of basic and natural human desires related to enjoying life and having fun, while restraint rather stands for a society that suppresses gratification of needs and regulates it through strict social norms. In indulgent cultures like Mexico, data collection methods might include questions about leisure activities and personal enjoyment, whereas in restrained cultures like Russia, questions might focus more on duty, work, and societal expectations. The URL to Hofstede's website, now run by his son, who's a Dutch population biologist and a professor, has a wealth of information, data, and tools. That URL is in the right column of this slide. Check it out if you're interested. I'm using the country comparison tool on one of the companion sites to Hofstede's work on culture. And as a sample here, lots of countries are included, but as a sample I used the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, to check out some of the scores. Most of the time we think of these four countries as similar simply because we label them the BRIC countries, but there are differences, of course, perhaps most notably in uncertainty avoidance. I'm not taking a look at uncertainty avoidance, I'm taking a look at power distance instead. But even small differences on any of these metrics are sometimes very important. The bottom of the screen shows the basic interpretation of the scores for power distance. And if you're interested, go to the country comparison tool and check out more data and interpretations. Brazil, Russia, India, and China, very like each other, but also very, very different from each other. It's time for some cultural diversity and consumer behavior examples. These examples highlight the importance of understanding and respecting cultural diversity to effectively meet consumer needs and preferences in different markets. And we've had some shorter examples before as well. So packaging all of those together, we get a nice picture of the cultural influences that could come into play. Let's look at food preferences in India first. McDonald's adapted its menu in India to cater to local dietary preferences by offering vegetarian options and avoiding beef and pork due to religious beliefs. This cultural sensitivity helped McDonald's appeal to a broader customer base and respect local traditions in India, of course. Beauty standards in South Korea. L'Oreal introduced skincare products in South Korea with a focus on brightening and anti-aging properties, reflecting the local beauty standards that prioritize flawless, youthful skin. This cultural adaptation drove product success in the South Korean market. Payment methods in China. Alibaba's Taobao and Tmall platforms, big platforms for online buying, prioritize mobile payment solutions like Alipay, reflecting the Chinese consumers' preferences for cashless transactions. Understanding this cultural preference helped Alibaba dominate the e-commerce market in China, as probably would be expected, everything we know at this point in time. Coffee consumption in Italy, interesting story. Coffee is lots and lots of a need and want in Italy. Starbucks took on that idea. Starbucks modified its traditional cafe experience in Italy, a country with a rich coffee culture then, according to my setup. They introduced smaller espresso-focused offerings and incorporated local design elements in their stores to respect Italian coffee traditions and attract local consumers. Household cleaning in Brazil. Procter & Gamble or P&G tailored its cleaning products for Brazilian consumers who prefer strong scents and frequent use of cleaning agents. By aligning with local cleaning habits, P&G increased its market share in Brazil's competitive household cleaning market. And then finally, local flavors in Turkey by Lay's. Lay's introduced potato chip flavors in Turkey that resonate with local tastes, such as yogurt and herb and spicy kebab type flavors. This adaptation to local flavor preferences helped Lay's strengthen its market preference and appeal to Turkish customers. Ethnographic approaches that are used in international marketing research typically dig deep into customer sentiments beyond perhaps some of the examples we just had. Ethnographic approaches in international marketing research involve immersive fieldwork where researchers observe and interact with an international community in the natural environment to understand their cultural practices, behaviors, and needs. This qualitative method helps uncover deep insights into international consumer behavior, providing a comprehensive understanding of diverse international markets. For example, and just 3 of them on this one, Intel uses ethnographic research to explore how people use technology in different cultures. By observing daily tech interactions in various countries, Intel gains insight into user needs and preferences, informing product development and marketing strategies tailored to diverse global markets. Procter & Gamble employs ethnographic methods to understand household routines in different regions. By living with families and observing their daily lives, P&G identifies unique needs and pain points, leading to the creation of products like Tide Cold Water, which caters to markets with limited hot water access. IKEA, back to IKEA again. I'm going to use IKEA a few more times, so bear with me on those. They also conduct ethnographic research by visiting homes around the world to observe how people live and use their spaces. This approach allows IKEA to design furniture and home solutions that cater to specific cultural preferences and practical needs, enhancing their global product offerings. Another methodological deep dive can be done by using anthropological methods. Anthropology comes nicely into play in international marketing research as well. Anthropological methods involve the in-depth study of consumers' cultural and social behaviors through techniques like participant observation, in-depth interviews, and cultural immersion. These methods provide rich contextual insights into consumer lifestyles, needs, and preferences, helping companies tailor their marketing strategies more effectively. For example, Pepsi used participant observation to understand Japanese vending machine culture. By observing consumer interactions with vending machines, they tailored their product offerings and machine designs to better meet local preferences and usage patterns. Nestle, next one, as an example, conducted in-depth interviews with mothers in West Africa to explore infant feeding practices. These interviews revealed a preference for locally sourced ingredients, leading to the development of products that incorporated regional ingredients and met local nutritional needs. And back to P&G, they engaged in cultural immersion with Brazilian families to understand laundry habits and water usage. This immersion helped them design and market laundry products that performed well with minimal water usage, aligning with local environmental conditions and consumer practices. Going a bit more specific than ethnographic and anthropological studies, language and communication barriers simply refer to the challenges researchers face when conducting studies across different languages and cultural contexts, as you might expect. These barriers can result in misinterpretations, misunderstandings, and biased data affecting the validity and reliability of research outcomes. For example, a couple of examples on this one. KFC encountered a language barrier in China with their slogan, "Finger licking good," was mistranslated to "eat your fingers off." This error, of course, highlighted the need for professional translation services and cultural consultations to ensure accurate and culturally appropriate messaging in marketing campaigns. And that one is well known, so you probably have heard of it before. Another example is HSBC faced communication barriers when their "assume nothing" campaign was interpreted differently across cultures, sometimes implying distrust. They learned the importance of understanding cultural communication styles and adapting messages to align with local interpretations, improving their global communication strategies. I'm going old-fashioned with a David Letterman-like top 10 list here, and I'm actually doing it a couple of times in two different sessions. David Letterman, of course, hosted a late night on NBC and late show on CBS for a collective 33 years. He made top 10 lists popular. Here's my top 10 list of guidelines for creating sensitive research tools. And these are 10, of course. I'm going with them as top 10, but we may want to mix and match a little bit on the order. For now, this is what I'm sticking to. Use clear and simple language. Avoid complex language in what you do in terms of international marketing research. Use straightforward, easy to understand language to ensure that participants from diverse backgrounds can comprehend the questions without confusion. And in localized content, we have talked about localization a lot so far in just a few sessions we've done. Adapt questions to reflect local contexts, customs, and examples. This ensures relevance and being able to relate, making it easy for participants to engage meaningfully with research tools. Engage local experts, we mentioned a few times as well. So it is obvious that it's going to show up on the top 10 list. And by the way, David Letterman usually started with number 10, went up to the big one, number 1. I'm going more in the order that is comfortable, I guess. But engage local experts, collaborate with local researchers or cultural consultants. Since we're talking about culture in this particular session, local researchers come into play at various stages of the international marketing research process, if you will. Well, anyway, cultural consultants, they can review and refine research tools. Their insights help ensure cultural appropriateness and avoid potential misunderstandings. Pilot test comes back a lot as well, but pilot tests with diverse groups. Conduct pilot tests with small groups from different cultural backgrounds to identify and address any cultural insensitivity or ambiguity in the research tools. Next, number 5 here is incorporate cultural symbols and references. Use culturally relevant symbols, images, and references to make the research tools more engaging and relatable for participants from various cultural contexts. Respect privacy and sensitivities, and we're going to get back to that also. Be aware of cultural norms regarding privacy and sensitive topics. Ensure questions are respectful and avoid intrusive or potentially offensive topics unless necessary and handled with care. Offer multiple language options if you have the option and availability and expertise to do so. Provide the research tools in the local language. That's a starting point of the target population at minimum. This reduces language barriers and helps participants express themselves more accurately. Consider nonverbal communication. Be mindful of nonverbal communication cues, for example, gestures and facial expressions, which can vary widely across cultures. Design tools that accommodate these differences. That's a tough one. Obviously, in a survey, it's really tough, probably not going to happen, but in some kind of participative or some form of observing what's going on, take those cues into account. Use open-ended questions carefully. All open-ended questions can yield rich data because respondents can answer lengthy, short, however they see fit. Ensure they are culturally appropriate and not too abstract for participants from cultures with different communication styles. And then number 10, ensure that anonymous and confidentiality are playing a part. Clearly communicate how participants' information will be protected to build trust and encourage honest and open responses, respecting cultural attitudes toward privacy. Well, in my case, having a mechanical engineering degree, I can relate to the notion of complexity and what it means for customers, especially in terms of switching from one product to another. My saying, it's on the left side of this slide or screen. My saying is very simple. Make it easy to do, hard not to do. If you make it easy to do, hard not to do, if that tag team shows up, we're in pretty good shape. I think that line resonates with the most globally oriented products and services. This single panel comic here, 9 out of 10 of our engineers say this product is easy to use. That may be good for our MIT educated engineers, but how about our less educated customers who use the product? Easy is in the eye of the beholder is the cliche, of course, but easy is in the eye of the user is one way we could go here to bring out the same general story as make it easy to do, hard not to do. Let's mix in some brief case studies in this case, covering a variety of the methods and cultural adaptation. Each of these examples demonstrates how deep cultural understanding and local customization are key effective international marketing and product, key to, I should say, effective international marketing and product strategies. And these are very brief, but nevertheless, they tell a story. McDonald's adapted its menus and marketing in India. We mentioned India a little bit before by launching vegetarian options, respecting, again, local dietary preferences and religious practices. Coca-Cola used on-the-ground teams in Africa to understand local consumption patterns, leading to the introduction of smaller, more affordable packaging. Nike conducted immersive consumer research in China to customize products that match local athletic preferences and fit. And Unilever leveraged ethnographic studies in Brazil to develop detergent formulas suited to the colder and more humid climate, enhancing product effectiveness. Short, but it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of understanding to get to that particular point. Back to Shep Hyken again, very quickly this time around. It is of course true that as customers change, you must change too, if we go with that quote. But change for the sake of change cannot be the mantra. It should be change guided by marketing research, at least in the context of satisfying the needs and wants of potential international customers. Marketing research can drive appropriate product and service change. It can drive innovative changes. It can be a way to evolve as a company, provide stability for the company to be constantly having the pulse on the dynamic marketplace. It can be a way to evolve successfully. So basically on the left-hand side said no, change for the sake of change. And yes, in a bunch of different derivatives related to research, marketing, innovation, and so on. You can take a look at that, as well as Shep Hyken's single panel comic that goes along with it and talks about the particular change. Let's talk about cultural misinterpretations and solutions, as that guy is working on the clock in the background. I'll get to him a little bit if you haven't seen him live. So there are misinterpretations and solutions that we can talk about related to culture. Fascinatingly, then the hands of this Martin Boss Schiphol airport clock in Amsterdam are drawn on in real time. But are they really? Well, someone did every minute for 24 hours, and now travelers passing through the gigantic Amsterdam airport in the Netherlands see this optical illusion kind of a way to think that there's always a man inside the clock. I'm stalling there a little bit to say it correctly because it really truly looks like a real person working on the clock, which is fascinating. Obviously, that's a bit of a misinterpretation, if not optical illusion. Let's discuss examples of common cultural misinterpretation instead. Consider the difference between direct and indirect communication. Assuming that feedback is straightforward across cultures can lead to misreading responses from cultures where indirect communication is the norm. To address this, researchers should be trained to recognize, if at all possible, and interpret non-direct feedback appropriately, ensuring they understand the true meaning behind responses. Power distance is another area where misinterpretations can occur, and it comes back to this over and over again with Hofstadter's work, overlooking how hierarchy influences responses may result in expecting subordinates in high power distance cultures to openly critique management, which is unlikely. A solution is to use anonymous surveys or third-party interviews to ensure honest feedback without a fear of repercussions. The distinction between individualism and collectivism, another Hofstadter dimension, also presents challenges. Misjudging group-based decision-making in collectivistic cultures as a lack of individual opinion can lead to inaccurate conclusions. Research methods should be designed to consider group dynamics and community input, allowing for a more accurate representation of collective perspectives. And then finally, as the guy is sitting there, the clock is about to stop and it's not moving the 1 minute, I guess. Yet, at least. Finally, concepts of time vary widely across cultures. Expecting punctuality in cultures with a more relaxed time perception might lead to mislabeling respondents as uninterested or unreliable. Researchers should adjust scheduling expectations or provide flexible time windows for participation to accommodate different cultural norms regarding time. And we'll leave the guy alone. He worked hard for 24 hours. Cultural values, beliefs, norms, and artifacts are often unique around the world. After all, we have again 195 countries and about 62 territories. It's a little bit dynamic, so those numbers change every so often, and myriad subcultures, of course, within these areas. In this clip, I talk about the notion of arriving late as a cultural example, so let's take a look at that.
In many countries, arriving late to a social party is considered rude. But that's not the case in South America. In Chile, for example, if the host plans for dinner to be served at 8 p.m., guests are expected to arrive around 8:15, or even a few minutes later. Actually arriving on time, or even earlier, often means catching the host unprepared. You may also be looked at as too eager to get a free meal. In Ecuador, arriving 15 to 20 minutes late is considered being on time. And Brazilians consider meeting times elastic, showing up whenever they please. Even parts of the United States have adopted these traditions because they have attracted large populations of immigrants from countries with cultures that have flexible thinking about arrival times. In Miami, it's common for dinner at a get-together to be served late. And in Sweden, the country has even adopted a saying for being late to gatherings. It's called academic quarter, since academics were assumed in the old days to show up 15 minutes late for class.
Let's discuss the impact of culture on survey design as a takeaway perhaps a little bit from that being late video clip. It's fascinating to think about the academic quarter in Sweden, where I'm from, because it was truly the way to go for professors to show up for class late, whereas the rest of the country show up pretty much on time. So it's a fascinating uniqueness of sometimes late, sometimes on time, or most of the time, for the rest of the time on time. That's enough time for us for right now. So let's discuss again the impact of culture on survey design, focusing on specific considerations for designing culturally appropriate and effective surveys. When designing surveys for multilingual populations, language translation and localization are essential, of course. For example, in Canada, we'll go right next door to where I'm sitting right now. In Canada, surveys should be available in both English and French if we're in those particular parts of the country, using culturally relevant phrases and sayings. This ensures that respondents fully understand the questions, reducing the risk of misinterpretation and enhancing the reliability of responses. Cultural sensitivity in question design is also crucial. In Middle Eastern countries, for example, avoid questions that might be considered intrusive or offensive, such as those about personal relationships or political views. Instead, focus on more general topics and frame questions respectfully. Pre-test surveys with local experts to identify and remove potentially sensitive content, and by doing so, ensuring the survey respects local customs and social norms. The use of visual aids can be particularly effective in regions with varying literacy levels, such as parts of sub-Saharan Africa. Incorporating visual aids like images and symbols helps clarify survey questions, making them more understandable for respondents with limited reading skills and improving the accuracy and completeness, of course, of their answers as a result. We hope. Appropriate response scales should also be considered. For instance, in Japan, using a traditional Likert scale with a neutral midpoint might not be effective due to a cultural tendency to avoid extreme responses. Instead, consider using alternative scales, such as semantic differential scales, which can accommodate cultural response patterns while still capturing the necessary data accurately. And finally, the consideration of the survey medium is vital. In rural India, where internet penetration is low, conducting surveys through mobile phone calls or in-person interviews might be more effective than online surveys. Choosing survey mediums that align with the target population's accessibility and preferences ensures higher response rates and more representative data collection. And in summary on this one, these considerations help ensure that surveys are culturally appropriate and effective, leading to more accurate and reliable data collection in diverse cultural contexts. The absolute basics in training researchers for cross-cultural competence, and we're in an international marketing class, international marketing research at that. It's not necessarily our job to train researchers, but nevertheless we need to understand what kind of training may need to go on for international marketing research to be reliable and accurate and valid and important for decision making. Nevertheless, we talk about cultural sensitivity training, ethnographic skills development, and bias recognition and mitigation. Cultural sensitivity training involves educating researchers on the cultural norms, values, and communication styles of target markets. This training helps prevent cultural offenses and enhances rapport with participants. Ethnographic skills development, we're getting deep into the training here, focuses on training researchers in ethnographic methods such as participant observation and contextual inquiry. These methods allow researchers to gather nuanced insights without disrupting the natural setting or cultural dynamics. This is also where nonverbal cues come into play, and we do really need to have trained researchers for that aspect of it. And then finally, bias recognition and mitigation emphasizes the importance of recognizing personal biases and stereotypes. Researchers are provided with strategies and tools to mitigate these biases during data collection and analysis, we hope. And then finally, for this session, we come to the assignment. Again, essay assignments are a part of sessions 1, 3, 5, and 7, as well as 9. While quizzes take place after 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, those session numbers. From Harvard Business Review, like the first article we had, briefly, let's see what we did in this one. We took a look at how can a company best create a compelling customer experience, or I did, based on research involving thousands of companies and analysis of millions of customer data points from the AC side that we have. Companies need to focus on 8 areas, the way I summarized it: orchestrating the marketing ecosystem, aligning company and customer needs, delivering amazing customer convenience, reinforcing digital marketing, adjusting customer incentives, potentially, cultivating customer evangelists, that's a tough one for me to say, handling customer complaints, and managing product returns. Those are the 8 things I talked about in this particular article. And the assignment I loosely titled Cultural Considerations and Customer Experience. The prompt then is to select a company with headquarters in South America, as you've started to notice by now. I'm moving you around the world for each of these essays. Anyway, pick a company headquartered in South America and analyze how cultural considerations have impacted the company's efforts to create a compelling customer experience, globally or for specific markets. Integrate 3 to 4 content topics from ideally the session on cultural considerations that we just went through, as well as the HBR article on 8 best practices for creating a compelling customer experience. And as usual, your report should, I said no more than 500 words in this particular case, but I'm also always plus minus a little bit. 500 is the happy medium average starting point for these type of assignments. And the session covered cultural considerations and research. Keep in mind that even though we emphasized Hofstadter's work in various ways, other cultural frameworks may influence international marketing research. Our goal for the session was to infuse culture into the thinking about developing and implementing IMR, and that could be effectively done with the Hofstadter's work. But culture, as the music is picking up and I need to get out of here, it pertains to individuals, companies, industries, countries, and even regions that may come into play, depending on what type of situation you find yourself in. Alright, I need to go because the music is loud, so have fun with the assignment related to the session and the HBR article on 8 best practices